Hello everybody, my name is Michael, and in today's video what we're going to be doing is this right here. So if that looks interesting to you guys, please carry on and watch the video. And also one more thing before we get into the video, if you enjoy what I do here, please don't forget to leave a like, comment and subscribe. It really helps me out and lets me know you enjoy the video. But with all that out of the way, let's get into that video. Okay, so as we start painting up our desert-based rogue here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make him a dark skin character. So I'm going to use obsidian skin as my base coat here. This is going to be a nice, deep, rich brown. It's going to be a good place to start off with our base coat here. As well as that, since I want to be doing that, I've made sure that I've also placed on a neutral tone primer, because I'm going to be using a lot of light and dark tones here, so I've gone with a nice and simple grey primer here to start off with, so that way I'm not worrying about things being too dark, or if I went with a white primer or a very light grey into too light a territory. I just want to keep it super neutral, so I've gone with a nice neutral grey tone primer here. Okay, so now we have that base coat down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come in with a highlight here. For this I'm going to be using mocha skin, and this here is just a little bit lighter skin, and I want to be focusing this on some very particular areas. So the top of his head there, since he's bald, so that's going to be nice and lit up by the sun. As well as that, I want to get that forehead and brow line, and as well as that I also definitely want to try and get the bridge of his nose, as well as his nice defined cheekbones in there as well. Now when I'm going in and picking out these areas, I'm making sure that I use the side of my brush rather than the direct tip, so I can get a bit better coverage with our paint on here, and I'm not worrying about that tip bending and putting paint in places where I don't want it to. So just a little tip there to make it so you get some smoother areas on nice little spaces like that. Then once we have our highlights in, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with a different brown. Now this here is going to be charred brown. This is a lot deeper, richer brown. This here is going to be used for the leather boots and the leather gloves of our miniature there as well. And I want to make sure I get a good base coat on there, and I've also made sure that I've made the two browns distinct from his skin color and from the leather that is going to be on his his gloves and his boots, because we're dealing with a dark skinned character, and I want to make sure that those browns aren't the same, so we can get some nice clear distinct areas of where are his skin and where are his leather clothing. So just a nice easy way of separating it out there. Now of course, if you're going for timing, you're just really wanting to get something on the table nice and quick, then you could probably use the same browns. I wouldn't recommend it, because everything would start blurring together and you would lose a lot of the miniature on the table, especially when you're looking at it from a distance. So I would highly recommend separating out the two browns, using for any leather areas on a model that you're painting up that has brown leather areas, and when you're painting a dark skinned character, making sure that those browns are two different so you get nice separation between those colors. Then once we have that skin area picked out, I'm going to come in now with some woodland camo, and this here is a green, but a very more like neutral, like olive green color. So I want to keep it nice and muted. I'm going to keep a lot of the colors on this character very muted, because I want to make him either like a sand like raider type, like an enemy you would encounter in the desert somewhere, or a like a rogue who's based out in the sort of like nice dry desert and arid areas like that. So I want to keep the colors to sort of mix in with the theme here, so I'm going to go with anything too crazy, but a color that's also going to work with a lot of the colors I'm planning to use in the future. And I think I'm going with this nice green here, not going too bright and saturated, is really going to help me give a nice base with the colors without standing out too much on the model. Then once we have his pants painted up, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with an ochre color, and this here is going to be for his like jacket he's wearing, like his coat that he's got on. I want to make sure I give all of this a good coat with the ochre, and this is to definitely make sure that it blends in with the desert environments are going in. So if he's laying down on the ground, or it's coming at you front on, it'll be a little bit harder to see in the desert. Try to keep those desert type of colors in there. Well, not so much like desert type colors, but colors that will help and blend in with the environment, because I don't want to be doing it too crazy, but I want to make it also look sort of believable as well there. And I'm just making sure that I'm giving a good overall coat there. And one little thing too on this model here is I'm trying to avoid painting out some of the little like plates he has on his model, I'm going to have a plan for those and make them a little bit interesting. So I'm just trying to avoid that and just trying to get in that main coat that he is wearing. Now that we have that painted up, what I'm going to do now is come in with another type of a neutral color, and this is just going to be simply for the rope we're painting around here. Now this is a slightly different color from the ochre color, maybe a little bit hard to see on camera, but it is a different enough color that hopefully it'll stand out just a little bit. I don't want it to stand out too much. I want it to be similar in terms of, you know, going with a regular rope tone, but I also don't want it to be the exact same color as his shirt there. I do want it to just stand out just a little bit, so I've changed the color up just slightly, but not too much on the piece. Then once we have that rope painted up, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with some Agrax Earthshade. Now Agrax Earthshade I'm now going to be using over the entirety of the model here, giving everything a good overall coat. That includes the skin as well, since I'm dealing with a dark skin character, and I want the brown to be incorporated with that too, to blend all those colors together. Now you could of course go for a flesh wash on here. This would add in a little bit more red to the mix, but I wanted to keep it all just straight, easy and brown, just moving on to the step, because I wanted to paint up all the areas that we're definitely going to use a brown wash and then do it all in one nice, quick and easy step. So that's one way you can make your painting just a little bit faster. If you know you're going to use, for instance, like I am here, one wash that's going to be predominantly over a lot of pieces, is to paint up all those pieces with your base coats first, and then you can apply a wash to the whole thing, rather than applying washes in each little step and chewing up extra time for painting up your miniature. Then once we have that wash completely dry, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to be using some Stonewall Grey. Now this is a nice grey colour, and I want to be using this for his cloak. This is of course to blend in with that deserty environment. Now you could of course go for like a yellow type of cloak here, more sandy colour. I wanted to just have it just stand out just a little bit like that, so it's not going to blend too much into the base, but is going to look like he's naturally part of the environment here. So that's why I'm going with this very light tone, almost grey-white colour here. So I think it would look really good, and given that little bit of pop out on the miniature from the base, that I'll be making a sand type base there for that. So giving it a just nice, easy overall base coat, but of course making sure to practice our brush control and don't paint anywhere where we've already had all of our wash and everything to apply, because it'd be a lot of work to tidy up those stages. So just being careful over the entirety of the piece. Now we have his cloak painted up. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with a bone color. In this case I'm using Dusty Skull, and this is the part that I'm going to be using on those little plates I was talking about. Here's just a few little plates on the front of his jacket, but he also has plates exposed on his arms, and there's just a couple of little bits of the plate exposed on his chest. Now you could easily go with a metallic color here and make it a regular sort of just basic metal armor, or you could indeed go for leather as well, since I'm painting sort of a rogue here and it looks sort of roguey to me. Leather armor would also work here, but I'm going with bone color because I want to make it look like it's bone armor, and that will help tie it in with the theme of the desert. I'll make this guy, he's a ruffian who lives out in the desert, and he fights what he uses and uses his environment to help him survive out there in the wasteland. So whether he's a good or a bad guy, you can use him as the model, sort of either that he picks up some scraps he finds, and just give him some little visual interest to the whole piece overall. So now we have those bone parts of the armor picked out. I'm going to come in with Seraphim Sepia. Now this is a sepia wash, and I'm going to be applying this over the two parts we've just painted up, and that is of course the nice grey whitish cloak, and I'm also going to be painting over that bone armor. And a nice bone color with a sepia wash over top really does make it look a lot more like a realistic bone. So this is of course going to tie these two nicely together and give you that nice effect of just tying them in. But because we've got a light grey and a bone color there, they're very similar, but they should stand out just enough that you can tell that these are two different types of materials on the miniature itself. And of course we want to make sure, since we're painting in that cloak there, that we're trying to avoid as much pooling as we possibly can, because there's nice big deep recesses in there, so don't be afraid to move it around a bit and work it up just a little bit before it starts to dry. Then once we have that completely dried up, what I'm going to do now is come back in with my original Stonewall Grey, and I want to be using this for some highlights because we basically have all of our base coats in and we've applied all of our washes that I want to so far. So now I'm going to come in and do some highlighting stages. I'm going to be saving the metallic areas for last. So coming in now and using the side of my brush here to pick out those nice deep areas that, well, I shouldn't say deep, I should say the nice raised areas, sorry, rather than the deep areas. I want to be painting up those nice raised areas because that's naturally where the highlight's going to be. Then once we have those highlights picked out, what I'm going to do is come in with my original green here, and I'm going to come in and just paint the highlights of the pants. You know, this model is really well sculpted in terms of the nice sticking out detail of where the highlights are going to be. So I want to be picking out those nice big flat areas that are facing towards us, and just the very tips of all of the ridges that you can see in the folds of the pants, so we can get some nice good highlights going. Then once we're finished with the highlights of the pants, I'm going to come in now with some spiky bone. This is a very light bone color. And I'm going to be picking out some of the tips of the parts of the armor that I want to make that nice shining point in the sunlight. That's how it's going to look like bone. This is very close to a white. It's not quite a white, but it's very, very close. And I'm going to be just picking out some of the points here to hopefully make it look a little bit more like bone. Now, I don't know how well my paint job is going for you guys to tell whether this is bone or not, but I'm trying my best here, and hopefully that it just gives you that little bit of difference in the armor and something interesting that you can think about for when you're painting up your own miniatures, that you don't have to paint everything as leather or metal armor. You can mix it up a little bit there by adding in some bone and give it some interesting color for the entirety of those pieces of armor. Now that we have that bone armor complete, well, I'm coming in now with an oak brown, and this is going to be a lot lighter brown than we've already used in our charred brown that we used for our initial color. And I'm just going to be coming in and picking out the highlights. Again, I'm going to be focusing a lot of the areas that are facing directly to the camera, so you can see where those highlights naturally are to pick out. And as well as that too, I also want to pick out anything that's sort of facing out towards the sun. I'm picking out the spots that are much more closer to the camera, so when I take the pictures at the end, they look a little bit more fancier. This is of course totally up to you where you want to place your highlights, but I like to try and either go for, like, you know, the front of the model or where you'd be looking at it from, or either from above where the sun sort of naturally is, especially this guy since he's in a desert based environment. Okay, so now we have our highlights done. What I want to do is I'm going to come in with some metallics now. So I'm going to be using a bronze for this, and I'm going to be focusing this just on the handles of our weapons. Now you can see too, I've also given a quick coating in black for our models weapons that you can see here. Now the reason why I've done this is I think when you apply metallics over black, they just look that little bit better, especially if you're painting up very like silver areas. I think coming over with a over silver over black can really help enhance certain parts of those metallic areas, and I just think it works great for all metallics. So I like to just to enhance that just a little bit up, is I just quickly paint over any weapons the miniature have that I'm painting in a metallic color before applying that metallic color, just to make that pop a little bit, whether it makes a difference or not. But to me, I just feel it makes it just a little bit better when you paint over with a metallic and you have that black as a base coat. Then once we have all of those handles painted up, I'm going to come in with our gunmetal color here. This is going to be any silver that you want here, and I'm going to be painting just the tip of that dagger there, of course, where the blade is. And I'm not actually going to be painting any silver on our big weapon, you know, the sword he has in his hand, because I want to be doing something a little bit different for that. I wanted to try out a new technique I haven't really done too much of before, so I want to just go in there and just give something a good old try, and hopefully it'll come out alright in there too. As well as that too, you can see I'm just picking out some of the belt buckles there as well. Okay, so now I'm going to come in with a green, And so, like I said, I'm going to try out something I haven't really tried before, and I want to be making a magical weapon, essentially. So I want to make this sort of like a poison blade, or like an acid covered blade. So I'm coming in here with a dry brush, and I'm dry brushing on a nice emerald green. So just giving it a good old dry brush. Now, I'm not going too hard. I'm not trying to paint the entirety of the blade edge there. And as well as that too, I'm also being careful that I'm not hitting the handle. I'm really sort of focusing from just a little bit up from where it meets the hilt of the blade, and then focusing more up towards the tip. Then once I've done that dry brush, I just want to come in now with a green wash, and I want to use this to just darken everything back down again and make it so I can see a little bit of the edges of the blade here for our next step. This is a totally up to you step, but I want to make sure that I can see the blade and all its edges nice and easily, and as well just put a little bit of interesting color, since we've got dry brush and we've got different textures on there, to just bring it all back down a little bit with a wash. Then once we have that complete, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with some electric lime. This is a nice bright lime green color, and I'm going to be focusing this on the tip of the blade and some of the edges of the blade, which will hopefully give off the nice shining effect that this magical sword, will have in the light when you're seeing it, and it's got the different angles and different colors. So I'm using this, as you can see, with the side of my brush here to flick out the edges of the blade, so hopefully it looks like it's got this nice shining effect around this sort of magical energy, and hopefully make it look a little bit more interesting with the poison effect going through. Anyway, that's my theory behind it. We'll see how well it turns out in the end here, as we're going to now move on to some of those glamour shots. So let's see how this model came out. And with all that complete, we have finally finished painting up our Desert Rogue Raider, I think is what I'm going to call him here. So I hope this video has been helpful for whether you want to follow along with what I did here, or you just want to use the video as some inspiration in painting up your own miniatures. But with all that said, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video.